With It Chapter 2 still out in theaters, it's time to rank all three It movies from the worst to the best. Hello everyone, I hope you're having a wonderful day. I'm Josh, this is Simply Cinema, and before we begin my ranking on all three It movies, I'd love to hear your take on them down in the comments below, including the 1990 miniseries. But if you haven't watched that, let me know down in the comments below if you like the first or the second chapter of the modern It better. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave it a like and subscribe if you're new here. But without further ado, let's begin. Starting off with number 3, we have It, the 1990 miniseries. And this isn't a particularly bad film. I still barely enjoyed it, and especially for its limitations of when it came out in 1990, it does have a lack of technology that they're able to use, so I am able to appreciate some of the props and how well they're able to craft this film for as good as what they have. But still, they don't have too much, and combining It Chapter 1 and 2 isn't a horribly bad idea for being a complete set. But in the end, it just doesn't land as the first half of the film, where it's technically It Chapter 1. There's just a lot of back and forth between the kids and the adults because they don't necessarily separate the two. They already have the adults all fully grown, and they have to reflect back, and they jump back and forth from the adults to the kids because they start with the adults and they have to tell the story of the kids still. And so it sort of gets jumbled up when they don't just keep it consistent from the kids to the adults. But it still was a decent film. It wasn't great. It wasn't necessarily all that thrilling as it should be, but it was pretty good for its time. Moving on to number 2, we have It from 2017, the reboot. And this film did a lot better than the original 1990 series. It separated the second chapter from the first, and so it was able to centralize around the kids, telling their story, giving a lot more. And from what I heard, there's a book that's 1,000 pages, so it makes sense to make this 2.5 hours long on its own, and then the It Chapter 2 for 3 hours long. It makes sense to, because it has that much content to cover. And not that the original 1990s series did a horrible job explaining everything and how the story flowed, but this sort of just gave you more focus on the kids, gave you more development, more moments with them to really understand where they are and to like the Losers Club as they are. Of course, with a lot of the modern technology and props, they're able to do a lot more with it, get Pennywise to look a lot more menacing and give the effects that makes it a lot more scary. And that's where it really drives home. But where it does not really work for me is the fact that the kids look like they're younger, under 10 years old or whatever. In It Chapter 2, it mentions they're in middle school, but it looks like they're really young, and there's just a whole lot of swearing. And for me personally, it just feels off-putting seeing kids like under 10 years old just keep constantly swearing. And I know it sort of fit the tone of consistently swearing in the first film to allow the adults in It Chapter 2 to swear, but it just was really off-putting to me. And I still feel like it would have been believable if it's just a little swearing in the first and then a lot more in the second. But of course, it didn't bother me too much. I still really enjoyed where they were going with it and what ended up coming out. And at number 1, we have It Chapter 2, and I'm going to first talk about the negatives because it's not a perfect film by all means. It's 3 hours long, and it did feel a bit lengthy at times as they tried to dive into flashbacks from It Chapter 1 technically. And so the mix of all of the kids going back from the adults to the kids back to the adults, and then having all of this different story that happened during the time of It Chapter 1 woven into It Chapter 2 just felt like a little confusing, and it brought me back to the feeling of watching It, the 1990 miniseries. And it wasn't necessarily horrible because all I enjoyed this story the 3 hours went by fairly quick for what it was trying to show, because the beginning and most of the middle and then the end is where it was really enjoyable. It went quick, it was fast, it was more thrilling, they had a lot more effects and visuals that were really great, and Pennywise, of course, was so much more menacing in this, and I just really loved how the story flowed throughout the whole thing. And all those were just my personal opinions and how I would rank those films, and I'd love to hear your opinions down in comments below. Let me know how you would rank them, and if the first 1990 miniseries lives up to being better than It Chapter 1 and 2. And if you haven't already, make sure to check out my complete review on It Chapter 2 down, and make sure to also check out this video that YouTube suggests specifically for you, and also hit that subscribe button right in the middle if you're new here. Make sure to like this video and subscribe, and I'll be back for more movie reviews, ringing and more.